So I will be speaking about physical modeling in sound. It's quite there's hardly any funding in this business, so it will never look like something that you just saw. But I'm an artist, so I'm a music producer or composer and an artist. So I come from a background that is not scientific of any kind, but I have an interest in that. As I am quite bored of producing music or composing music, because there's very little technological advancement in the field at the moment. So my interest started from that and being like, okay, how can you imagine new ways of making sound or producing sound? And then I got into this, which is physics-based sound synthesis. And it's quite old field, but recently, due to the fact that you can do more advanced computation, there has been some great development. And I will talk briefly about the development of this and like how this could be used for compositional use and in creative practices. So yeah, let's just start. Yeah, my interest comes from the idea that we are getting more and more practical virtual reality, that you could actually have access to these kind of devices and so on. And my interest is that the fact that there is a lot of funding in CG as a business, because there's you have it for films, you have it for scientific use and so on, but there's no hardly any funding for physics-based sound synthesis because of the application of it. So if you look at, for example, a film that is simulating something, that you would never hear it simulating sound, you would just have it silent, or they would put some sort of soundtrack over it, because the process of simulating the sound is something that you wouldn't really need to do. You would ask like, okay, well, why could you just then mimic it? Or why could you just put some other music? What is the purpose and the application of simulating sound, right? So I started to get interested in that, and I also started to get interested in how that could relate to my practice as an artist and as somebody who composes music or sound. So yeah, physical modeling synthesis is basically that you would have, it started more or less with the instruments. So you would say, instead of having a violin, we make a simulation of a violin. So you could basically just sit at home and play on your computer, and you get the sound of a violin with all its capacity and all its properties. So you would simulate the whole instrument and then get the sound out of it, right? So it's not just mimicking, it's actually trying to simulate all the aspects of it. Then this has now been applied to more or less real-life sounds. So you could simulate, for example, the sound of water or the sound of a shopping cart, right, from its properties. And that, for example, is quite a CPU heavy process, but still there is a lot of development in this field, and I will show you some. How can I get to the here? Yeah, I will show you some development, recent development in this field. Is there sound here? So these are synthesized sounds. What also started to interest me when I was looking at this material is the actual composition and the elements that they used, and the creative practice of choosing material and making these environments. Yeah, but they don't actually. There is. This one's not so good. But I mean, the composition is amazing. Yeah, of course. Well, it's just the CG. They're all CG guys also, you know. They're very passionate about CG. Yeah, now get comparisons, basically. And yeah, there's some visualization. You can see how they basically, what kind of methods they use to calculate this. And it's only mathematics. It's I mean, it gets quite surreal when you look at it like this, and you think like, what is the real purpose of doing this? And my interest became also in the aesthetics of this. My practice is a lot about the unintentional aesthetics of science and how a scientist often like turns into artist at some point because they have to take compositional decisions on their presentations. And I think that also subscribes to the CERN guy before me a lot, like his presentation and his choice of imagery and so on. And so what I would propose is that it's not just about simulating sound, it's also about creating this imagery that again simulates these sounds, which for me as a composer enters a realm of a new way of imagining composition somehow, where you simulate a world, but it's purely another world, and in that world you create sound that reflects only in that world, and by that you create a new kind of composition. So they are not really aware of it, of course, they're just scientists, they're just doing this, but me, as I have never heard, for example, an album that had this, but also thought about the compositional elements that were used. So you could imagine the potential of simulating environments in an artistic project. So you could simulate the relation between specific objects or specific kind of environments. And of course now at this moment, this is heavily CPU related, so there's still a far way to go, but it's still starting to sound quite realistic compared to the environments they built, of course. And then I will show you quickly another. I have to go here, right? Yeah. I'll show you another, like the highlights that showcases some different development. And again, I'm fascinated by the aesthetics of this. Also, the rendering techniques are getting more modern, so you see actually development in the style, you know. And actually all of these, yeah, here, this one is very, very interesting, because here, there you can see the development of size, how they manage. And I will speak a bit about this because it's very related. The fact that we experience all this through our organs, like the ears. So the problem is that there's so much data that is computed that is not needed, because we can simply not differ between the sound. So the limitations of our ears is just kind of incorporated into this. So instead of computing all the aspects of that sound, which only maybe some animals could hear, or the frequency range that they calculate is just very small, because it's the only thing we would need at this moment. So therefore they can like scale down the sizes of the files and also the computation time. So that's quite relevant to development in this field also. And then now I will just show you briefly some use of similar elements of how they kind of model how sound can be used as to model the sound of simulated objects. So how sound will be related by the properties of the object, and how that they use these techniques also in physical modeling. But this is just one of the techniques. So you can see the different, how the sound will reverberation and so on, like how it will act. And these techniques they use, for example, in landscape or urban planning and so on, to see how sound will move in spaces, right? So they make some sort of computational, like a simulation of how the train will go, like drive through the area, and then they see, okay, the sound is going to be reflected here and here and here. And this is also used again in related to physical modeling. So let's see here. Yeah. So I will then speak a bit about what my interest is also in the fact of how could you apply these ideas into a more simulated environment where people have somehow access to this. And there was a recent development from DARPA, which they are all about restoring veterans or people that came from war, and to give them the same abilities that were taken away from them in war, right? So my interest was that they are bypassing, for example, the feeling of your hand by connecting things directly to your nerve system. And for me, this opened up a specific area. If you could start to combine these things with physical modeling, you would get some really, really strange things. And these are technologies that will be here quite soon, because it's already in practice at DARPA. So here you have someone who puts on a head tracker and puts on these specific gloves. So they are in a simulated environment, and as you can see, they are moving up and down and around. And in that simulated environment, they can real-time feel objects. So the objects has properties, and then you actually feel the surface of those objects. And for me, not here though, but we will get to that. So here you also see it with 3D monitor support, and of course you could just replace this with Oculus Rift, and you're in some sort of to combine that with like sensing. Like here you see they have a sensing glove that will like control the resistance to the material, so you actually get the properties of the material in your hand, right? And for me, at once you would build these kind of weird environments like this, you could also have synthesized sound connected to it, and you would start to kind of compose sound through these principles. And in that way, you would create a very strange environment for sound, basically. Which also, I don't know yet how that would be classified as composition, because already now there's many people experimenting with composition through gaming and through different virtual environments, that you compose sound, or sound just even compose itself through like procedural composition and so on, and procedural gaming. But my interest is like, how could you use these methods to build its own environment of or like even an own genre. It will become some sort of own genre of sound that just mimics real life sound. So how do I get it full here? Yeah, and now I get into some elements of how this would be built. I mean, we're still very far away from the reality of any of this, and that has mainly to do with the calculations of the sound. Now you need like 20 quad-core Xeon processors, and it will take you around 4 hours on those processors to generate 9 seconds of water. So there's quite, and then you could scale that up, right? So to calculate the water by all its physical properties, you would need a lot of processing time. So it's like so far from being real time of any kind. While in CG, they have already moved into real time CG, and I'll show you some of the latest development there, which also relates to this.
PhysX Flex is a particle-based simulation technique for real-time visual effects.
So this is actually real time.
So far, we showed examples for rigid body stacking, particle piles, soft bodies, and fluids. In this video, we'll be showing some of the new advancements within PhysX Flex.
Again, the aesthetics.
This scene
really
shows
nice.
two-way coupling of serial, represented by rigid bodies with particle-based fluid simulation. The milk is represented by up to 100,000 particles. Surface tension and viscous forces are modeled, and because the serial pieces have a lower density than milk, they naturally rise to the surface due to buoyancy. The milk surface is rendered in real time using ellipsoid splatting and a subsurface scattering approximation. In this smoke simulation, the underlying fluid is modeled as thousands of particles tracking velocity and vorticity. Using particles provides a sparse representation of the airflow and allows smoke to interact with the other particle-based objects. Because this is a grid-free method, there are no fixed boundaries on the fluid flow. For rendering, we advect hundreds of thousands of smoke particles through the underlying velocity field and render them with shadowing and a single scattering shader. Here are more examples of how Flex could be used.
So yeah, so what you can see there is basically that they can now do this in real time, which is quite impressive, first of all, but like the fact that this will, if you can have these real time CG environments, and of course there's way more money in that business, so this business has been developing so much more than sound, real-time sound processing. So that's one part that can open up for slowly having real-time simulations that we could access, right? And then, yeah, I'm gonna slowly finish it off with like showing an example of an environment that people have, where they are not doing real-time synthesis. They are doing synthesis, but not physical modeling synthesis. They're doing just normal synthesis, and this is in a compositional environment that is simulated. So you can see this is already somebody composing music in a 3D space where you will move with these like devices. You can move sound around and it synthesizes based on what happens in that space, right? So already the idea of this is quite known. It's just that we are working on like how to. And I think somehow this shows us a bit what we can expect to come if this field develops further, that you would compose into this space and you could move elements around and that will like compose new music. And it won't really be about music in the same form anymore. It would also be some sort of about the visual presentation of it. So it's clearly that you can see he's very active, and there is also areas where this is being used to create more or less beat-based music and not just sound-based music like this. But my interest is that when this gets coupled with Oculus Rift, for example, and with that you can move or feel in virtual space, it starts to get very interesting, because then you can basically just throw stuff around in a simulated environment and it would create a composition, right? People do that already kind of in gaming, but this would like kind of up the levels drastically, and the technology is starting to be there already and available for us. So yeah, that's basically my interest, and I have no access to any of it. Right now, no. I mean, I'm just looking at my screen at this, you know.